The number one challenge is leading change in the organizations. Yeah, and that is the leading challenge by far, because technologically there is a lot more than we can do than organizations are currently able to integrate, accept, and embrace. Therefore, the leadership angle is always the key question. How involved is the senior leadership? How do they explain the transformation that is coming with the tools? How to get the buy-in from the employees, who very often they can easily feel threatened, very easily, if this is not explained as a way to improve the work that they do, improve their contribution.
Hello, I'm your host, Karan Mehta, and today my guest is Carlos Escapa, technologist, an author, and a longtime AI leader. Carlos has spent decades shaping the AI landscape, from co-founding a tech startup to leading major AI initiatives at Meta, and now heading global data and AI practice at AWS. Carlos also teaches next generation as a guest lecturer at UC Berkeley, SAD, and many other universities around the world, bringing the real-world experience into the classroom. With his mix of industry leadership, hands-on innovation, passion for education, he is the perfect person to talk about how Gen AI is transforming business, reshaping learning, and where the next decade of AI is headed. So with that, Carlos, welcome.
Thank you very much, Karen. It's great to be with you here.
Absolutely, Carlos. I've been looking forward for this conversation, so really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule. I gave a little snippet, but would love to hear a little bit more directly from you about your journey in this amazing tech world. So if you don't mind and indulge us a little bit, that'll be great.
Right. Well, I guess my background is in data center plumbing. A lot of that. I actually started my life in storage and network management in data centers. I actually spent a few years at VMware when virtualization came up. And then, as you pointed out, I created a startup that was for automating disaster recovery across data centers. And after that, I joined AWS. Serendipity brought me into AI because I guess I had expertise in storage, and from there sort of jumped into big data. Then my customers started to do machine learning on Spark clusters and so on. And before I knew it, I got sucked into this maelstrom called artificial intelligence. I spent 2.5 years at Meta, where I managed the global partnerships with Microsoft, AWS, and Google. And then I rejoined AWS.
That's fantastic. I would love to get your perspective on the business value which every business is trying to get out of generative AI. Any examples where you are really seeing this genuinely improving business performance?
Gosh, yes, a lot. We get dazed by the word intelligence, and it doesn't appropriately describe what this technology does. I think it would be a lot more interesting to describe it as finding correlations in a multidimensional space. So any business process where you have a multitude of signals coming about the customer, about the business process, about a transaction, about animals in agriculture, about trains in transportation, and so on. All of these different dimensions, that metrology that you can extract, we have a whole bunch of algorithms that allow us to find these correlations. And I think that the big surprise for us a few years ago when the transformer architecture came up is that we could actually find correlations also in language. And this was really amazing, right? Nowadays, if you will, in the most advanced language models, we actually are finding correlations of 100,000 types of tokens. These are the size of the libraries that are used in the large language models. I don't know how far we can take this, but in terms of actual business applications, my favorite probably is the one in the UK, where there's the Ministry of Work and Pensions. It is actually using AI in order to process 26,000 letters per day and finding citizens that are at most at risk. These are people that may be at risk of losing their homes, or they have mental health, or they're widows. And then this is the needle in a haystack kind of problem, where you get 26,000 letters of all kinds of things, and then there's probably 1,000 or 2,000 really needy citizens every day that very often they used to fall through the cracks. Nowadays, all of that process is automated, and those letters that are really important get immediately routed to a civil case officer that actually tries to contact the citizen the very same day that they receive the letter. So I think this is the most for me at least, has been the most emblematic use of artificial intelligence to really improve people's lives. This really saves lives. It's not a joke. When somebody's in a critical situation and they ask the government for help as a last resort, and they have to wait. They used to have to wait months to get attention, and nowadays they get it very, very quickly. This is what I think is what AI really should be about. It's about improving people's lives.
That's incredible. Absolutely agree. I think that's a great example. On that note, what are sort of the challenges you're seeing with these customers as well, some which are trying to get these initiatives accelerated?
The number one challenge is leading change in the organizations. Yeah, and that is the leading challenge by far, because technologically there is a lot more than we can do than organizations are currently able to integrate, accept, and embrace. Therefore, the leadership angle is always the key question. How involved is the senior leadership? How do they explain the transformation that is coming with the tools? How to get the buy-in from the employees, who very often they can easily feel threatened, very easily, if this is not explained as a way to improve the work that they do, improve their contribution. Think about the civil servants in the example that I mentioned, right?
Yeah.
Rather than have to go through the drudgery of reading many letters some of them are complaining about the temperature in a waiting room or trivial things like that. Many letters are basically saying thank you because he was very well attended by somebody in an office. That is great, but obviously taking the time to go through all that is not something that people feel valued about. But if you shift their work away from this kind of clerical work and they're actually on the phone or even visiting in person the people that they're supposed to serve, they feel a lot more empowered and a lot more grateful for the opportunity to contribute to society. Explaining this and leading it takes a very special skill. It's not something that all senior executives are able to articulate. Very few of them truly understand the nature of the technology that they're asking their teams to and find use cases for. So that is what I find the number one issue is leading change. Number two issue, inevitably, fatably, is the state of data infrastructure at our customers. The data moves slowly. Sometimes, you talk about trick huggers when you talk about environmentalists, right? You have these database huggers in organizations that do not want to share their data, or they put people through a battery of security problems and committees that have to meet in order to extract the data. The data warehouses in general, they tend to concentrate only on structured data. So these are extractions from transactional systems. If you really want to know what's going on with your customers, you have to be looking at website visits, mobile application use, call center calls. Customers reveal a lot of information when they interact with the different channels, and harvesting all of that information is difficult. It is unstructured information, so you have to build data pipelines in many different places and land it in a way that downstream the line of business can use those data. So at the end of that flow, you may have a language model or other models, right, that are doing this correlative analysis and that may be able to surprise the customer because they can find what is the intention of the customer or what the customer is interested in. Yeah, this is where the interaction with the end customer, if you don't have all of this context about the customer situation, then the value of applying AI is going to be diminished. So very often in projects we find that there's a lot of upstream work that hasn't been done or has been neglected for the last 10 or 20 years. And if you really want to do things right and apply AI in an intelligent way, then actually you have to do a lot of preparatory work with the data.
I want to double click on that because I know in various occasions I've heard you say that AI is not a strategy, data is. What do you mean by that? We'd love to hear your thoughts on that, which you just kind of pointed out.
We should dispel one thing, and that is AI is not just generative models or LLMs. That is something that everybody should be clear about. AI is really an application that uses machine learning or some sort of a rules engine embedded in it. That's what we denominate with artificial intelligence. And we shouldn't look here for human intelligence in the way that we understand it. It is a very limited way of intelligence where there is no cause and effect. All we have is correlations inside of these machines, massive correlations that a human being could never find. Like if you throw at me more than 2 or 3 variables, I get confused, right? Whereas in machine learning, we don't really have a limit. We can look at things in as many dimensions as you want. So the model that you use, if you use a model from a third party, whether that is OpenAI, Moonshot, or Mistral, just to name 3 different continents and different places, you're actually using somebody else's data, right? It is through training data that they have derived the model. So it is illusory to try to get competitive advantage out of using somebody else's data. If you really want to apply artificial intelligence in order to develop competitive advantage, you need to be using your own data. And you can sort of do a lot of things halfway, but by doing context engineering with your own data and then use somebody else's model. That is perfectly fine. But somebody who develops their own models based on their own data or fine-tunes external models with their own data, that's where I find that maximum profit, maximum benefit from AI can be derived. So I think that the model is nothing other than just an artifact that is made from data. Therefore, the strategy should be about your data. And then the fact that you build models with the data is just a little bit like saying, I am an oil company and I make kerosene. And then I sell the kerosene to the airlines. But what's really important is the extraction and the refining process. That's really the core of how I generate value for the airlines. And it's not simply in shipping kerosene to them. This is the analogy that I would invite senior leaders to consider. And then they have to go and dive and understand what is their data state like. Most of them don't even understand it because they have over-delegated this issue for the last 20 or 30 years. They have delegated that to a CFO who has a CIO reporting to them, who has a CDO reporting to them, if they have one, right? So you're talking about many different layers far removed from the CEO. The companies that are very different in this space, of course, are those that are digital native, those that have been created in the last 10 or 15 years. This CEO generation of digital native companies, they do understand that they need to be the chief data officer. And in these kind of companies, you actually find that AI is adopted significantly faster.
That's fantastic. Are you seeing organizations fine-tuning the models, these large language models to suit their needs, building their own custom ones? Like, where do you see majority of them falling? As you said, don't add the context and just see what answers I get or what the results I get, or they're really providing the data and adding that context. Where do you think the needle is right now? Just curious.
Well, if you ask somebody that is near me here in the Bay Area, California, United States, there's a very skewed view of the world. But actually, if you look at the world at large, people are still very much doing POCs with language models. That's what they're doing at the moment because it's kind of easy. So those companies that have the ability to fine-tune models are few and far between. They just simply do not have the data pipelines ready to do the fine-tuning. There are some new companies that are actually trying to address this issue head-on, like thinking machines, for instance. That's exactly, they want to fix this problem directly, helping customers to make it easier to fine-tune their own models. And good luck to them. I hope that they are very successful. But that's not that. We're talking today in terms of fine-tuning capabilities. You're talking about maybe 0.01% of the companies in the world. You're talking about the pioneers, if you will. You have some early adopters also, but if you go further, like fast followers or the mid-tier, in your adoption curve, or the laggards, they're really still far from having a data posture that would allow them to fully embrace AI and adopt it in all corners of their organization.
On that point, generative AI living up to the hype in terms of ROI. What misconceptions or unrealistic expectations do you see among the leaders, right?
That's a very complex question because enterprise adoption versus consumer adoption of generative models is completely different, and value capture also is completely different, right? I'm going from memory, but I believe that this year we're going to see some $60-odd billion of generative AI business in enterprise, and in consumer, you're talking about teens of billions, right? And actually, the value generated is probably the other way around, because if you just think about any child in the world today who has access to internet, almost all of them are using generative models to help them with their homework. So the effect on education around the world is huge, and there's no value capture from it. Most of these kids would not pay $20 a month to have access to a model. The democratization, and I'm abusing a word that is oft abused, of language models is now really going exponential. And as a matter of fact, Chinese models really, really are taking off at the moment. Just a couple of months ago, the downloads of Chinese open source models actually overtook American built models, and they're streets ahead of European models. So this democratization process is increasing very, very rapidly. So the use of electricity, data centers, servers, GPUs, communications, all of that infrastructure is still not aligned with where the demand is. It's, sorry, not the demand, sorry, the value is at the moment. And it's very interesting to look at how the different strategies are here, right? Because a company like OpenAI is definitely completely focused and committed to the consumer market. Anthropic has actually been a lot more oriented towards the enterprise market. Yeah. If you look at Chinese companies, I see a lot of activity there in applying AI to physical machines, robotics, of course, but many other machines as well. So they're taking a different approach, and I think very pragmatic and frankly very interesting. That we need to start to paying a lot more attention about how AI is being adopted in China. And I'm going to generalize a little bit, right? Because in South Korea and Japan, I also see a massive amount of application of AI to physical systems. And this is absolutely evident, right? That manufacturing capabilities in those countries are streets ahead of the US, Canada, or Europe. So yeah, it's a confusing market. On top of all that, the numbers are really difficult for people to understand. $500 billion of CapEx this year, 2025. Most of the big tech companies are probably going to spend more than they committed at the beginning of the year. In China, the investment is in the region of $60 to $70 billion. However, you have to be a little bit careful with those numbers because that does not reflect purchasing power parity. So the effect of spending $1 in China where the electricity is a lot cheaper, well, everything, a hammer is cheaper, cement is cheaper, everything is cheaper, right? So the effect is significantly larger than that number would reveal. And actually, the investment in electricity infrastructure in China is absolutely huge. So this is a market that is moving in such unexpected ways that, get ready. It's going to be a very bumpy ride. Not only this week, it's going to be for the next few years.
Let's just say there's a business who's just trying to tap into this and say, you know what, okay, I want to see where I can apply this within my business. You're in the trenches with other businesses. What will be some of the recommendations you will give, like choosing the right problem or first working on the data? Just long-term success. What will be your recommendation to a business leader who might be listening to us right now?
One key recommendation would be to identify workflows where there are human mistakes that are taking place. That would be one key question. Then when you look at the specific mistake that is being made, then go and find out if there are data in your data state that could better inform that human that makes mistakes for whatever reason. And then if those data are available, forget ML and forget AI for a moment. Just provide more context, provide more data to that person. And then try to understand how that decision is being taken and what data would make that a better decision. And then if you can actually find a correlative analysis that helps with that specific aspect of the workflow, then put together a project team, get a data pipeline set up, use some basic approach, even AutoML. It doesn't have to be a neural network. It could be something relatively simple, and just try to find if there is some model that can help get an inference in front of the user that could help them to do a better job on a day-to-day basis. It sounds very elementary, but this is actually something that really works. Is identifying those points in the workflow where humans are making mistakes, and there are mistakes that can be prevented.
Very helpful. Thank you. This is, I think you alluded to this earlier, that there is a fear, I'm going to focus on the enterprise. I think people, again, we can do the stats. If somebody has to, I'm sure there are surveys out there. There are folks within an enterprise who have embraced, the AI and can see the impact. And then there are some who are concerned and still on the sidelines. And I'm going to an individual contributor. My question to you will be, as the business leaders, enterprises continue this journey and with an intent to widen adoption, are there any other things to help them understand that this is where you're able to do value work? It's an opportunity to be more strategic, right? That's, I think, every business leader is thinking as they're getting aware the potential of some of these AI applications. So my question is, what have you seen out there when you're working and consulting and giving guidance to these enterprises? What is really working to create an environment where an individual contributor feels more empowered and more excited versus having fear that this might replace what I'm doing? So I would love to hear your thoughts on that, because I do feel a lot of business leaders out there, irrespective of the size of the business, are scratching their heads. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I must admit that with a lot of humility, I am scratching my head also about these issues. I have a lot of people actually asking me upfront. I have a 17-year-old, Carlos. What do you think would be a good path forward for him or her with their career? It's a super tough question. And actually, Sundar Pichai was asked this question recently. I was listening to a podcast. I think it may have been with Dwarkesh Patel, but he didn't answer the question. He went a little bit around saying, I'll make sure they have a good overall education, blah, 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 and then they will be able to be a better lawyer if they want to be a lawyer, or a better doctor if they want to be a doctor. I think we're all grappling with the fact that there's a lot of mundane clerical tasks that people do every day. And for many people around the world, that's most of what they do. And they're very comfortable about not having to use their brain a lot or whatever, or maybe they just basically, through complacency or whatever, they get into a rut and they do the same thing for 20 or 30 years. And all of a sudden you have this technology that can automate a good chunk of it. And yeah, people definitely feel like their livelihoods could be threatened. I think that we should acknowledge. And fear is very primal, right? It's not something that is part of our limbic system. It's our first reaction, particularly when change happens so quickly and is so difficult to understand because there's so many moving parts and the technology is moving so quickly. So we need to understand it. And now I'm going to refer to the words of a guru in India, Amit Ray, who has studied in detail the effect of technology on humans. And a few years ago, he was already saying that if you start putting artificial intelligence into the office, you'll better bring along a lot of emotional intelligence. And it's very clear, right? Leadership has to look at employees in a completely different manner when artificial intelligence is adopted. So these fundamental traits of empathy, understanding how they feel, even exercise a lot of compassion for the fact that these people have to go through a significant change. Leaders need to ask a lot of these employees, of course, but also need to provide a lot of resources, paths, reassurance, and also lead by example. This is not something that just the CEO can say, hey, implement AI. I want to see 10 POCs in every department, blah, blah, blah. It just doesn't work, right? It's a complete waste of time. This is where you find all of these POCs in the 95% of MIT, alluding to the report that they put out in August. I think this is all needs to be come together from a human-centric point of view. It has to be not human in the loop, it has to be human in the lead. It has to be very clear that we don't want this technology to end up disempowering people, because that will disempower the organization. And then sooner or later, you start to find out that because artificial intelligence is a very imperfect technology, we need to know it, the corner cases. Once you deal with data that is out of your distribution, normal distribution, it starts to do funny things because it is a statistical analysis. So you need to have a lot of humans here. The companies that have made mistakes include Klarna, Duolingo, the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, who thought they could reduce staff, and then they find out that customer dissatisfaction just plummets, NPS plummets. People have to be really careful. This technology is wondrous, is terrific, but it comes with a price, and the price is imprecision.
I love it. That's fantastic. I'm going to change the gears a little bit. Your role as an educator, again, I think I admire that piece. So just what inspired you to kind of teach innovation AI And just curious, what did you enjoy about working with the students?
Well, this is again serendipity. There is something in Silicon Valley that is known as Silicon Valley tourism. So you have people who come to this area, normally in groups of different companies. Sometimes it is the entire board of a company, and they ask for meetings with different companies here. So Monday morning they go to Google, in the afternoon to Salesforce, and so on. So they also come to Amazon, and I participated in the program that presents to them. It's a program that we denominate as Culture of Innovation, and we teach people how we innovate. We've had this idea of doing a double header using American baseball technology, where we would do a presentation about innovation and another presentation about artificial intelligence. And that was a massive success. We were really so surprised by the reaction of the audience and also the people who arrange these Silicon Valley tours. So we thought that combining a pitch about innovation, which is very high level, with artificial intelligence, with specific use cases, it was something that was of tremendous value to people. And at one point, we actually did it for a group that came from a university, and bang, that was like, wow. And this became something that I've been doing almost just about monthly for the last few years. We've had a lot of demand for it. And then, well, people basically say they reach out typically through LinkedIn, a nice Microsoft product. And then they say, hey, can you make a presentation for us? Or would you mind making that presentation again for my team or whatever, which we're very happy to do. And this is how I got into presenting and teaching people about how to go about implementing AI.
Wow, awesome. As always, Carlos, it's a pleasure to indulge in a conversation with you. So I want to thank you again. And I'm sure our audiences enjoyed it, and I'm sure there are a lot of nuggets which they can execute on. We really appreciate you taking the time and hope to continue the conversation and have you back on one of the next episodes, Carlos. Thank you so much.